Hello and welcome back to Conquering My Collection. It's another Masters of Cinema title again, and I should mention it in the previous video, which was my thoughts on Eureka, that I was speaking to fellow YouTuber Man Film, Graham, and he was telling me that he'd watched 50 MOC discs this year so far. And I just thought, holy shit, he's put me to shame. I need to get on it and start watching some of these films I haven't seen in the collection so far. So, I think I've now seen 70 of the 211 spine numbers that I've seen. That doesn't really count films though, because there's a lot of short films in the Buster Keaton box set, so I've probably seen maybe closer to 100 films if we're counting those short films. Otherwise, spine numbers, I've seen about 70. This one is a film that I really had no interest in. I remember when this came out 5 years ago, Eureka sent me a screen. I looked at it, I just thought, I just don't want to watch this. Not really that interested. So I decided to really push myself here, because the last one I talked about was Eureka, which is an MOC film I really wanted to see. This is one I really had no interest in seeing. So I wanted to push myself in buying it, because I collect all of them anyway. So I thought, let me just buy it, because I've avoided buying it for 5 years, and just watch it and see what it's all about. And the film is The Naked Prey. Produced, directed, and starring, produced and directed by and starring Cornel Wilde, who was quite a big actor in the 40s, kind of Hollywood actor. And he moved into directing, making his own films in the 50s. And he made a film that went way over budget and kind of was a bit of a tricky spot for the kind of finances and stuff. And so when it came to making this film, The Naked Prey, he had to really convince the people who were backing it financially that this was going to be like a really low budget production that was going to be made in Africa, wasn't going to take much of a crew. He's the main star. He's the only real character in the film. And so they went off to Africa to make this film on location. And it was kind of plagued with problems in that he didn't prepare for it very well at all. He luckily got very sick as soon as they got there, and so they had a week break before starting the film on the date that they had planned, and they managed to kind of, other people managed to kind of pull together more of a plan in terms of housing the crew and setting things up, having things ready for kind of safety, because there's a big sequence in the film where there's a lot of fire, and this is out in the wilderness and stuff, and there's animals to work with. So ultimately it kind of turned into this thing where in hearing about, because there's a really good interview on this disc from the film historian Sheldon Hall, who kind of gives a lot of context on the making of this film. In hearing that kind of quasi-troubled production of this film, really explained to me how this film turned out the way it did, because this is not a polished, fantastic film to me. But I really liked it. I feel like this is a film my gramp would have really liked. I almost feel like calling my dad and asking if my gramp had seen this film, but I feel like it's obscure enough that he probably never did see it, and my dad would probably not know what it was about anyway. But it feels like that kind of man versus nature, man versus the world kind of movie my gramp would have enjoyed, out in the wilderness and kind of survival. And that's what this film is. It's about a man who is unnamed. He leads a safari out in the African landscape, the African country. I don't know what country it's set in. It's unspecified Africa. He's leading a safari there in the wilderness, and they come across a tribe. And he's leading the safari, but there's another man who is kind of, I don't know if he's like financing it, or if, because Cornel Wilde's character, he's the one he's the ringleader, he's making things happen. And he seems very, right from the beginning, it's a very smart move. You have the one guy who's like, he's the guy, I guess, who's like, he's passionate about killing the elephants, killing the animals, and like making money off it, like it's the greed side of it and the kind of horrible side of hunting. Whereas Cornel's character is very matter of fact. It's like it's a job for him, and he's not interested in the other side of it. In fact, the other guy in the safari, he's like, I'm thinking about getting into the slave business. You should join me. And he's like, no, I'm not interested in that. It's not my kind of thing. It's alluded to the fact he has a wife, and in fact, it's mentioned in the interview on the disc that there originally was a female character in the film who was Cornel's wife, and there was an alternate ending shot with her. But we see he has a wedding ring, and so right from the beginning you get a sense that he has a bit more righteousness in him than this other safari leader, who's again more about the hunting and all that kind of stuff, and is a bit more of a deplorable person. So they're moving through the wilderness and everything. They got a big group with them, and there is stuff of animals getting killed, which I didn't like. There's shots of elephants getting shot in the head and falling over, and that stuff I don't like seeing. There's even a scene where a group of the African men are gutting and cutting apart the elephant, and they're even just like going inside the body and like coming out again, and it was like disgusting. And it's a mix of stuff they shot for the film and a lot of stock footage. The Blu-ray looked great, like the quality of the footage was great, a lot of grain, very healthy grain structure, but it's very inconsistent once you get to the stock footage, which varies from 16mm to 35mm, but not very, either the quality isn't quite there. It might be like a dupe or something, I don't know, but there's jumps in quality with the wildlife footage, which is very much used as a kind of juxtaposing Cornell's mission, to kind of escape from the tribe who are chasing him down and hunting him to kill him. And then you see the animal kingdom kind of, doing the same kind of thing, hunting each other and stuff, the naked prey. What happens is they come across a tribe, and Cornell speaks, certain African languages, and he speaks to them, and they say, we want you to give us gifts for our tribe leader. And so Cornell turns to the other man and says, we need to give them gifts. And the other man's like, no, there's no way I'm giving up any of my things for these people. Like, fuck it. And so it's the arrogance of man and the greed of man coming back around to bite him on the ass. And so he says, look, this will give us trouble if we don't give them gifts, or just give them a few trinkets, and we can move through peacefully. And he says, nah, it's fine. They won't bother us. And they do. They take great offense to this. They capture them. They kill everyone. And it's brutal. It's really brutal. And it's an interesting mix, because what you get in this film, and if I get the stand a second, what you get is this weird mix of really shocking moments in the film that are done in really like amateurish, unconvincing ways. The blood in the film is like this shock bright red that just doesn't look like blood, and so it comes off as very like amateur kind of dramatic, and then and so it's very strange. It's almost like it doesn't quite fit, because you're seeing something where the act of it is horrible, but the execution is not convincing, and so it doesn't come across as fully shocking, but it doesn't come across as fully unconvincing either. It's somewhere in between the two, to the point where it almost feels like this dream of something that isn't quite right, but still has an impact. And I'm sure that wasn't the intent, but for me it almost worked in a weird way. There's a scene where a guy runs away, and all the women run towards him with these very sharp sticks. And as soon as he falls down, they start stabbing him. But you can see that they're not really going for it, and then the camera cuts, and then they're going for it, and you hear him screaming, and it's strange, and then clearly they had tribes, and African, they would hire them as the kind of the extras cast, I guess you would call them, to work on the film. And many of them are credited at the end, actually. That was kind of nice. At the very end of the film, there's like a very 80s style, you get like each of the main kind of tribes characters who are in the film, they get their own like title card and like the credit of their name and stuff. And I said that he's the only character in the film, Cornell, but there are quite a few of those, the tribe that are hunting him, that do get kind of characterization and stuff. And Sheldon talks about on the interview on the disc that this film could very much be seen as a racist film in the way that it portrays African people, but there's also arguments against it in films like Zulu, where the African characters were very much just completely devoid of any character or humanity. And in this film, you see the tribe, they lose someone who gets killed, and they mourn them, and there is kind of semblance of humanity in there, and they're not these villains, but they are vicious, and that in and of itself is something that definitely I think would make people feel uncomfortable now. So it's intriguing to watch it from a 2020 perspective for sure, but I try to, as much as I can, remove myself from that, because then you think about other things. And I think as far as like, racist tendencies in storytelling like this, I've seen a lot worse for sure. But yeah, so it all goes to shit, and Cornell kind of gets spared. The other people get killed very viciously, but he gets spared. And I love the way he played it when he's watching like the people he's with just get killed, and he's almost not reacting. It's this sense of just dread, and I'm done. Like, there's no way of getting out of this. And it's like you feel his numbness, that what can I do? There's nothing I can do. And, well, hey, maybe he just wasn't acting and it was just a very blank performance, but that's what it evoked for me. And I just thought, fuck, this is like And obviously I knew from the cover that he goes on the run, and what happens is they basically give him a head start. They take him out to this field and they just let him off to run with nothing. He's completely naked, and so he runs. They give him like 30 seconds, then they start chasing him. And there's many mistakes in this film. One of the big ones is that he's not really naked. He's just wearing these like flesh-colored underpants, which at first I thought were just his underpants. But he kills someone early on in the film and takes their kind of loincloth, whatever you'd call it, and it's like this black piece of cloth, and he puts it on. And I'm thinking, why is he putting on a second layer? And then I realized that he's supposed to be naked in the opening of him running away from them, but it's very clearly just he's wearing flesh-colored underpants. It's very obvious. Another mistake I spotted was at one point he bends down to do something. He stands up, and in the background you just see cars. Multiple cars. Like, you don't really see them, but you see through the trees the kind of the glint of these moving objects, and they're very clearly cars. And this is set in the 1800s. There's another one where you see like a crew member stand up and the shadow kind of appears, and I thought it was him getting cornered. I was like, oh, they found him, but no, it's just a crew member standing up. So there's these sloppy moments in the film that feel so amateur, and it's just like, man. And so the film is constantly in play with itself with these great moments and some really nice cinematography and really nuanced bits of performance from Cornell. Not so nuanced moments at times too. That he certainly, there's some more obvious moments of acting where it's a little bit ham-fisted at times, but it's constantly like this tension between the kind of the great stuff going on and the really not great stuff going on. But some of those mistakes are fleeting and they don't last too long. But I mean, deaths in this film are quite shocking, but ultimately a bit too over the top. Someone will get stabbed and it's like, and you can hear the overdub. There's just a lot of things that I have to say about this. I have to say, and I feel like I'm going into way too much detail, but I really did enjoy this. I really did. Once it really got going, from the beginning, really, I feel like Cornell, I'd like to see him in more stuff. He has a really good screen presence, and he was in his early 50s when he made this. He's in such good shape. Like, holy fuck. He's running across the country in this movie wearing nothing but this loincloth, and he's ripped. He's in great shape, and he looks great, for his age and everything. A very dashing, not so young fellow, but I was really wrapped up in it, and the first moment where he is released and he's running away and they're coming after him, amazing sequence. The way the editing builds the tension, just cutting to the feet running through the grass and his bare feet running, and he's staggering and he hasn't quite got the energy and stuff, and then the tribesmen are running, and it's like they're running like almost like the Terminator in Terminator 2. And the drums, there's so much use of like African drum music in this film, which is probably not the way to describe it, but it's so effective, fitting to the scenario and everything. But the way that it literally drums up tension is fantastic, and the way that the sound of them running very quickly towards him and like they're gaining on him, and it's like, I loved the tension of that. It was so well done. And so again, you get these moments where the filmmaking is just stellar, and then other moments where it just isn't there. Towards the end of the film, he kind of comes across this other settlement, and he kind of stumbles across this big, like, massive battle when this another kind of tribe come in, and they've got guns and they start shooting up the place. So he's hiding, and he meets this very young girl, and she's kind of hiding in a bush with like tears coming down her face, and he kind of very much is like, it's okay, motioning, just stay there. And people are coming, and so he kind of motions for her to stay there, and he runs in front of them to kind of spare her, basically. So he kind of saves her life in a way. He continues running. That was a bit of an unrealistic point in the film, because at that point he runs to kind of distract away from this young girl who might get killed, very violently. And then he runs into the settlement and just starts like running into a massive group and killing someone there. I just felt like just run in the opposite direction. I don't know. It seemed a bit like he was trying to work in more kills into the film or make his character seem even more impressive. But he continues running, and then he kind of slides down into this. He jumps into this kind of almost like rapids. Not quite rapids, kind of like a moderate, kind of version of that. There's kind of like rocks and waterfalls and flowing water, and he kind of slides into the water and down these little small waterfalls, and then he kind of washes up unconscious. And this young girl finds him, and she kind of drags him up onto the stones, and she kind of resuscitates him. And this is another moment where it was like, oh, this is like a really good scene, but they'd overdubbed this young African girl's voice with very clearly an adult voice, kind of with the panting, like, like as she's kind of like pushing on his back to kind of release the water. And it was so distracting because the scene's good, but you can very clearly hear this is an adult's voice coming out of the, you know, and it's like, like, and it was so strange. Like, hire a kid to do it. Okay, maybe they're not an African kid, but get someone whose voice is more age appropriate. I don't know. And it's not like that character doesn't speak. She goes on to speak and sing and stuff. But that was my favorite part of the film, was the relationship that formed between him and this young African girl. It was so sweet and endearing, and just this mutual sense of, you know, two people who found themselves in a really bad position and they just saved each other just because, you know, they're inherently good people. And, you know, the way that they kind of sing the songs together. It's a very short section of the film that they have together, but it's just really great in the way that they look at each other, and like he's trying to figure out if she speaks one of the languages he knows, but she doesn't, and he just goes like that, and she goes like that, and it's just like the kind of universal kind of, well, you know, it is what it is, and they smile at each other, and it's so genuine and heartwarming. And I was so glad, spoilers, that she doesn't get wrapped up in anything violent, because I was thinking, if they kill this fucking girl, I swear to God, I'm done with this film. But it was a really sweet, like, kind of almost break from the, you know, the violence and everything. There's a brilliant fight scene about halfway through where he comes across this guy and they're fighting with like a sword and a dagger, and it's fucking brilliant. Like, the choreography is great. It's so tense, and he throws like mud in the guy's eyes, and he's swinging his sword around, and you're like, oh my God. And I really felt involved, of like, you know, I felt like it was so threatening. You know, there was real peril there that I was really invested in. And you know, and again, some of the moments in the film with the combat is very kind of theatrical and not quite convincing, but sometimes it's really good. And you can see he's there doing all this stuff himself. So it's a very risky production because everything falls on him, and he did get ill a number of times out there in Africa. But they managed to, you know, finish the film and everything, and make it. And it endures as apparently kind of the film he's most known for. Overall, I really liked it. I would definitely watch it again. I was really surprised by this one. This is another reason I love this collection. It's another reason why I do enjoy Blind Buying, because you never know what you're going to get. And sometimes you get something like this, which it's never going to be a favorite film of mine, but it's something I really appreciated. There were things about it I didn't like the animal stuff. I did read that he very much didn't want to kill animals on screen just for the sake of it, and so the stock footage that was used was when animals were being culled by, you know, the parks and things like that. And there are stuff that they shoot with animals, and the way they do it is quite clever, but you very much feel the distance of the stock footage, it has to be said, so there's not much you can do about that. And like I said earlier, I think there's a sequence involving fire, which was really great, just in terms of the tension of it again. Tension is done really well in this film, I have to say, even down to the final scene where I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I read that this was based on a true story from the 1800s that actually took place in America. And it was a man who was captured by an Indian tribe, a Native American tribe, and they did the same thing. They kind of set him off and gave him a head start to run for his life, basically. So I tried not to think about that, but the fact that there is a story about that kind of tells you how it ended up, you know, ending. But I wasn't sure if they would change that for the movie, and so the ending I thought was great. Actually, the ending really was so good that it kind of made me feel better about the parts of the film that I didn't like and thought just sloppy moments that really didn't. There's a lot of stuff where characters are, well, not even speaking, because there's not a lot of dialogue in the film, but there are moments where you can see the mouth movements aren't matching and stuff. It very much feels like it's 3/4 of a great film, and then the other quarter was just kind of thrown together. And I don't know if it was just limitations of the time. And apparently Cornell was like a really chilled, laid-back director in terms of, like, you know, he wasn't stressed out about anything. He was like, yeah, no, he was described as like an eternal optimist. You know, like, yeah, it'll be fine, we'll work, you know. And they're thinking, okay, what if the weather's bad? We're shooting everything on location. He's like, no, it's fine, it's Africa. We'll get, you know, 2 months of sun. No worries. You know, don't even think about it, you know. And then he would also save money on certain pieces of the film and think, okay, I can spend it on here. And he started overspending. So, you know, very much like Again, an optimist and maybe not a realist in terms of some of the practicalities of filmmaking. Maybe that's where certain things just slipped away from him, and you know, sloppiness remains in the film, I think. But I will definitely look forward to watching it again just for that girl, because I think that she just had such a radiant expression when she smiled, and just their connection just felt really genuine and nice and sweet. And you know, in a film that maybe might get criticisms of racism leveled at it, and I wouldn't say that that's without merit. I think that relationship very much is the antithesis of racism, in which it's just these two people, doesn't matter about their race, they kind of see each other, and in a perilous situation they save each other's lives, and it's as simple as that, and it's just this basic human connection. They can't speak to each other, and that's another thing I liked about the film, is that they don't subtitle the tribesmen who are chasing after Cornell. And you know, there's at least a 45-minute section of the film where he doesn't say anything, and it almost plays out like a silent film in that sense, where it's just all about the action on screen, and you know, you don't need to understand any dialogue to understand what's happening. There's like a big scene with the tribesmen as they're kind of, you know, they're tracking him, they're trying to find him, and they get into this argument, and one guy walks off, he storms off, and they're shouting at each other. You get what's going on, even though you can't understand a word they're saying. But anyway, so I'll leave it there, and I'll leave a very quick spoiler note at the very end, just in case anyone doesn't want to get spoiled about what happens at the end, because I have to mention the final scene. I didn't love the film, but I loved watching it, you know, and I loved the 30-minute interview with Sheldon Hall. It gave so much context to the film that I thought was just, that's what these physical media releases are all about, I think. And yeah, so it was overall a hugely positive experience for a film that I really had no interest in seeing. And how can you really get much better than that? So, spoilers. At the end, you know, he's walking through the wilderness. You don't see it yet. He sees it before you see it, which is a great filmmaking choice. And he just kind of stops, and the camera pans around, and you see the building that he left at the beginning of the film. He's finally found his way back home. He's safe. He's home free. And he kind of collapses to his knees like, I can't believe I did it. And then suddenly the tribe turn up, or at least like the small group who are chasing him. There's maybe about 5 or 6 of them, and some of them get lost along the way as well. And so he's got this final run. So he's running away from them, and they kind of extend like how much he's running, but you know, it kind of just builds up more tension. And he's so close to getting back to the building, and he's staggering around. He falls over, and this guy's running up to him with the spear. He's about to kill him, and the people come out of the building and they shoot the guy down. So you have the remaining tribesmen like kind of looking from a bush, and they're like, oh shit, they've got guns. They've got him, basically. So it's that thing where, you know, Cornell has made it back, and the people have come out with guns. He's kind of safe, and it would be really foolish for the tribesmen to pursue that further. It's a fight they can't win against guns, so they decide, we're going to leave it. And the brilliance of that is not that it's a relief that he survives, even though it is. It's this moment where Cornell turns back and he looks at the tribesman who didn't catch him, and he just kind of goes, you know, like, fucking A, you know. and the tribesman, he looks off at him and he just goes like, and I think he does like a similar like, yeah, fair play, mate, and then off he goes. And it got me in the chest. It was like, fuck, like, I mean, it's a horrible situation where they're trying to kill him and he's killing their friends, but ultimately it's this kind of like, you know, we'll give you a chance to escape if you can, and he fucking did it. And it's like, fair play, dude. That was really fucking impressive. And he's just like, yep, fair play. You know, we understand the score. We were, you know, both parties were put into situations that you know, they had no control over, really. You know, I mean, he tried to stop the other safari man from disrespecting the tribe and giving them something as a gift to pass through peacefully, but you know, he couldn't change that. He wasn't fully in control. And then the tribesmen who are tasked with, you know, chasing him down, that's just the way their life is. They have to do it, whether they want to or not. And so it's this mutual kind of acknowledgement of like, fair play. That was a day and a half, wasn't it? You know, I loved that ending. It was so good. Anyway, Naked Prey. That's it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.